All right, we are streaming. Say hi, everybody.
Hello,
So,
hello.
I'm
Bonjour,
not
bonjour.
sure if how many people are watching us, but we are streaming, or if anybody's watching us, who knows? Um, but either way, we're up. We're ready to go. We are about to record the January 2020 book club. I suppose in theory we could have had all of our chit chat here too, so let people see how the sausage is made. But I'm not doing any editing before it goes on YouTube, so it would just live that way forever. So,
Dun dun
all right,
dun 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 dun.
all right. Are we ready to get going?
In the room. Yes.
Eric, you're the
Yeah.
second edition in the chat room. Is that what that is?
Deuxième.
Oh.
Deuxième.
Speaking of, okay. We don't have people to yell at us, but there we go. I happen to know that there are sound issues, and I know how to fix them now. It took me a couple streams, but there was an echo for a second there, and now there's not. Not that anybody is there. If there's nobody in the stream to hear it, is the echo really there? I don't know. It's like a tree falling in the woods. I suppose.
Except it gets recorded, right? For posterity.
All right. Let me hit record on the audio as well, as usual. All right. I believe the audio is recording. Say hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay. It looks like it's recording just fine. And I have so many windows open now that we're streaming that I have to monitor so many different things and keep a script handy to see. All right. We are recording. We are streaming. Tracy, get us started.
Yep. This episode of the Tome Show is brought to you by listeners like you. Thanks for using the Tome's Amazon and DM's Guild affiliate links, and our wonderful patrons over at patreon.com/the Tome Show. Welcome to the Tome Book Club for January 2020. The Tome is a D&D news, reviews, and interview show, and I'm your Tome host,
your
Tracy
co-host,
Hurley.
Jeff Greiner. In each book club episode, we discuss one D&D related book, spoilers be damned, in full book club style. And our book this time around is The Quest to the Uncharted Lands by Jelly Johnson. In the next episode, we will be reading, where'd it go? In the next episode, we will be reading, since it was recommended by a patron, Pawn of Prophecy by David Eddings. New to all of us. Eric, you've read a little bit of David Eddings, but not this one, right?
That is correct.
Okay. And
briefly, long time ago.
Yeah, and I think I may have read some David Eddings back in, like, I don't know, elementary, middle school age. I think I have some over on the bookshelf, but I don't know that I ever actually cracked them open. So this will be a good experience for all of us.
And speaking of all of us, with us, as always, is Eric Paquette. Hey, Eric.
Hello, bonjour.
Bonjour. So the book we're discussing today, The Quest to the Uncharted Lands, is the third and final book in the Solace series that Jelly Johnson wrote after her run of Forgotten Realm novels came to an end. There are 3 books that take place in sequential order and build upon each other, but they don't necessarily share characters or have a single story that they're telling. It's also worth noting to listeners that we, the Tome Show, have been streaming many of our episode recordings at... Wait, did you mean to do it that way?
I think so. What did I mess up? You tell me.
It was just weird
because it was
saying that we were...
I was trying to figure out where to say something early on. Sorry. Go ahead. Or not, whatever.
Do you want me to do... Okay. It's also worth noting to our listeners that we at the Tome Show have been streaming many of our episode recordings at twitch.com/Tome Show. The easiest way to get notified is to follow us on Twitch or even on Twitter.
Twitch.tv.
Everything we stream... What?
You said twitch.com.
Oh, did
Twitch.tv.
All right. I'll start over. See, Jeff, you add new things, do challenges
every time. It's written right there. It says TV.
It's also... I know. It's also worth noting to our listeners that we at the Tome Show have been streaming many of our episode recordings at twitch.tv/Tome Show. The easiest way to get notified is to follow us on Twitch or on Twitter. Everything we stream will eventually be edited and released as a podcast, so don't worry if streaming isn't your thing.
Before we dig into this book, I want to say thank you to all of our patrons who support us at patreon.com/The Tome Show. A big shout out goes out to the patrons who support us and help us pay the bills that make the show possible. Special thanks goes out to Doug Palmer, Jill Sanders, Leonard Pelche, and new patron Jared Rasher. Thanks for your support and for being the best darn patrons ever. Now, on to the book. Let's have a chat about the quest to the Uncharted Lands. Who wants to start off by telling us a little bit about what this book is about?
I can go. It's the story of the Iron Glory, which is a airship that is heading from the I don't remember the name of the Emerald Kingdoms and Dragonfly territories towards across the mountains into the Uncharted Lands. But more specifically, it follows three stowaways on the ship. Two that we follow mostly, which is Stella Glass and Cyrus.
Yeah.
Stella comes from the Mirror Kingdom. Is it Mirror Kingdom?
Maybe. I don't know that it was it wasn't particularly important because part of the whole point of the Iron Glory was that this was an opportunity for the two usually competing kingdoms to work together and try to bring some unity to their half of the continent.
But yeah, with Stella stowaway on it because her parents were on the ship. They were one of the main. They were both scientists, both doctors on the ship to go. So that she didn't want to be left alone from her family. Mm-hmm. So she stowed away on it. Quickly found Cyrus, who comes from the Uncharted Lands. Mm-hmm. And go ahead.
I was gonna say, so there's this whole thing where the people from these kingdoms say like, oh, there's these Uncharted Lands, we know nothing about it, and blah blah blah. But it turns out that people from the Uncharted Lands had been coming to meet them and talking to them, and they just never knew it. And that's what Cyrus comes from.
It just so happens that Cyrus and the other people from the Uncharted Lands look like but are not human. And so they just sort of show up and blend in and investigate things.
During the story, we found out that there is a third stowaway, a saboteur, who have been trying to sabotage the plan to get through to head towards the Uncharted Lands by crashing the ship. We've found later on it is known as the Faceless One because he has the ability to be able to shapeshift into any other persons. And we found out that he was one of the explorers that we found that came from the Uncharted Lands to come in, but we will find out, and we find out at the end that he abandoned the original goal of peace and all that because he saw the war that happened in the big war that that the previous two books talked about between the Dragonfly territories and the Mirror Kingdom, and thus he figured that them going to the Uncharted Lands will bring war there too. So he was trying to stop that.
So, and one thing I'm thinking about as, thinking about the book and stuff, it kind of reminds me of Star Trek, but instead of being the Star Trek crew, you're one of the planets that they happen to come on.
Yeah.
Oh, kind of, yeah.
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 Because the folks from the Uncharted Lands, in some ways, are way more advanced than the people here, right? They're the ones that have the the ship technology to be able to go across these mountains. They have magic and being able to be a doppelganger and stuff
kind of
like
sort
that.
of magic. It kind of falls into that realm of sufficiently advanced technology appearing as magic, right? Because it seems to be this strange, important, very important to them sort of metal or whatever that allows them to do a lot of the fantastic things that they do. And they're studying it and don't entirely understand it, but they're also not pretending it's magic. They're looking at it as, oh, we don't understand this stuff very well. We figured out how to use it to do some crazy things, but we may not understand it, but we're studying it, right? They're not treating it like it's magic.
Yeah. But we also find out that those from the adrenaline, like Cyrus, they are part machine. They're not, so they're cyborg, sort of.
Sort of.
But in a magical sense. And thus, that's how they are different from humans from the other the Lands of Solace.
Yeah, and it's weird because they're, usually you talk about somebody who's a cyborg and there's this idea that like they were a person and they had machines grafted onto them and so they're partially machines or whatever. But these people, the Olorons, which are the people from the Uncharted lands, they're not. It's not really like that. It's not like they were turned into cyborgs. They're just sort of born as human-machine hybrid people. That's just sort of the way they are. It's just a different physiology. It's just that part of that physiology happens to be mechanics and circuitry.
Right. It sounds kind of like an extrapolation of the whole mitochondria thing, because there was a belief at one point that mitochondria were separate organisms that kind of created this thing within us.
Right. Yeah. No. And it's an interesting. I mean, Jolie Johnson is, if anything, like came up with some really creative things in this series, right? At first we sort of discovered the different races of the Marrow Kingdoms and the Dragonfly territories in the was it the first book we met a Camelin, which are the people who can like turn into dragons. They can shape change into dragons, but otherwise basically look like people. And then we sort of discovered, oh yeah, there's also these people called Sarnans out there that are, they've got antennas and they're psychic and all that kind of stuff. And we've never really had one as a major character, so we don't know a lot about the Sarnans in too much regard. But this book featured one as like, what was she, the first mate of the Iron Glory? So we got to learn a little bit more about him.
Yes.
And so you've got these stowaways, right? And I think this is, and we, as we do, we've jaunted around a little bit through things, but Cyrus and Stella meet up, discover their stowaways, kind of come into conflict for a bit because they don't trust each other for a while, and then as happens with these kinds of stories, end up becoming the best of friends, right? And that's when she learns about him being partially machine, and he's got this ability where he can like shield and protect the ship, and so he's trying to do that to make sure the ship gets where it's going so he can get home. So yeah, and I'm curious, like, are the first two Olorons we meet are Cyrus, who has this ability to create shields to protect things, and the Faceless One, who has the ability to shape change and change his appearance, and it gives the impression that, like, do all Olorons have powers of some sort? Are there, like, is there set powers that, and they're sort of, that's sort of their racial divide? Like, there's a lot of this book raises a lot of questions.
Yeah. Well, Cyrus does talk about that because it is asked of everything, and he says that not all Alarans have powers. Like his parents
That's
don't
true.
have
I do
any
remember that.
special powers. But yeah, so there's just some have developed powers, but which Cyrus happens to be one of them.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah, you're right. So it's interesting, and I mentioned that this book raises a lot of questions. So first, Cyrus is like shielding the engine room and trying to protect it from prepare it for. He knows that halfway across the mountain range that separates the Uncharted lands from the Marrow Kingdoms and the Dragonfly territories, there's this massive storm that just perpetually sits on the border. And he's like, well, the ship is not going to be able to get through. He's like, I got myself in on the construction team and weaved some of this special, almost magical metal that we have from the Uncharted lands into the big gas balloon, because it's that kind of airship, to make sure that it would be a little bit protected. But I need to use my powers to really shield the ship to get it through the storm, or else I don't think it's going to make it.
Yeah. And just real quick, when I said magic earlier, I was talking about the powers, not the metal part.
Well, and even that, I guess we don't really know where that comes from, do we? It's sort of like the Camelins and the Sarnans, right? They have weird powers too that we don't understand.
Wait, you were saying?
I was just saying that it's kind of like the Camelins and the Sarnans. They have weird powers that we don't understand as well. So.
Right.
So, yeah.
But yeah, so Cyrus is trying to get them through that storm. But before they even get to that, there's the thing where the birds start attacking them.
Yes.
When they first start taking off.
Yeah, the bird. There's a horde or a flock of birds
with like razor sharp beaks, so they're worried about it's gonna get the balloon. And they have to try to, and that's when they first starting, like they have to do this just pretty much at the moment they meet, right?
Pretty quick, yeah.
Like not much long after. They don't trust each other yet. She's afraid but they have to trust that at this exact moment they're aligned in their goals.
Right, and it's a little bit like. First of all, that's when they first figure out that there's a saboteur, because they're like, who would have attracted these clearly deadly creatures that could be seen from miles away? Somebody specifically did something to bring them here. So that's when they first start getting a hint that there's a saboteur. They then, like, Stella climbs out the window, dangling off the side of this airship, however many feet over the top of the mountains, and then, like, sets off fireworks to attract the birds and get them away from the gas bag and the airship, which is fine and clever and brave and all that kind of stuff, right? And part of me wonders, like, how is it at that point nobody on the ship is like, hey, who set off the fireworks? Like, why didn't they start looking for saboteurs or her or whoever set off the fireworks at that point, right?
Right.
But they didn't. And then there were several other sort of instances of attempted sabotage. There was setting fire to was basically the janitor's closet at one point, and I'm trying to remember. There might have been a few other things like that as well. But Stella she had borrowed Cyrus's suit that allows them to basically be invisible if they move real slowly. And so she was sort of on the creep out looking for the saboteur, trying to figure out who it was. And then it all sort of comes to a head as they're going through the storm, right? Everybody goes below decks for shelter, and they're like, this is the perfect chance to get out and shield the ship to make sure it gets through. But Cyrus needs to be like up in the crow's nest. And so Cyrus is up in the crow's nest. Stella insists on going with to protect him. And then the Faceless Man shows up with his Lazuril Rod, which is some sort of special weapon they have over in the Uncharted lands that can really mess up Olerons.
Yeah, it's the living light.
Yeah.
Which can affect Lawrence a lot. Don't think it could affect that much for humans, but they weren't too sure.
Well, it gave Stella a pretty nasty blister and injured her pretty well. But you get the impression with the Olerons, it does the physical damage that it does to humans, but it also like shuts down their machinery if it's set to a high enough setting. So it's particularly problematic for them.
So the phaser's set to kill.
Exactly right.
And I think during the Crow's Nest part, we learned about it before then, and it's been about 2 months since I read it, so there's some details I'm a little fuzzy on. But there's something about touching Cyrus while he's using his powers. Right. That if she does that, interrupts things, or at least doesn't it give her a glimpse into his mind?
Well,
basically?
Right. So he tells her, "Don't touch me. Whatever you do, don't touch me. It's going to mess things up." And then we're in trouble, right? And then it turns out that wasn't really what was going on, right? At least the impression I got was that it wasn't an issue of it's going to mess things up. It was an issue of him using that as an excuse because he sort of has to open himself up, and it gave her a glimpse into sort of his mind. Right, and so that's the impression I got, was why he was making excuses, like, don't touch me, it'll mess it up. But it was really like, don't touch me because I don't want you to see all my secrets. But ultimately, in order to protect him, because he was going to like go barreling over the side of the crow's nest, she had to grab him and save him from the faceless man. And in the process of doing so, learned a bunch of these secrets, and that's when we sort of got the backstory of Cyrus. He was part of this expedition. They came over. What was it? It was something like his mentor or whatever was left him behind in order to escape, and then left him a note saying, "Hey, sorry, we couldn't wait, but we had to get out of here." Sort of a real look after him, myself sort of thing, and abandoned him. In the Dragonfly territories, Marrow Kingdom, one of those two, and so then he's been working ever since to try to figure out how to get back. He's left family and people behind. He wants to get back home to.
Yeah, because we also find out that he didn't leave on good terms with his parents because they didn't really want him to go, right. And so he decided to go anyway.
Yeah.
So he feels terrible about that.
Yep.
And he feels also that probably they think he's dead there. That is no longer. That's why he hasn't come back.
Well, and the expedition came back without him, right? So one could guess, one could imagine that they probably claimed he was dead, or at least disappeared, so he has to be assumed dead, right?
Right. Which is kind of an interesting echo to the fact that Stella, was supposed to stay with her. I think it was her grandparents, and she decided to run away and do this so that she could be near her parents.
Right. Absolutely. They both have very similar goals in terms of wanting to get back to or stay with their parents who they were, for whatever reason, separated from. Or, I guess, supposed to be. Yeah. Stella never managed to get separated from them. She worked it out that she was there the whole time. But she didn't see him for a week or two.
Yeah. For most of the book, she is separate from her parents because she's stowaway. She doesn't want to be found and all that, even though she's there. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and that does take quite a bit.
But it's about...
It does... As books tend to do, like, the pacing's not even, is it? Like, you spend a good 2/3 of the book just sort of establishing Stella and Cyrus and their relationship and the beginnings of them hunting for the saboteur and all that kind of stuff. But then once that whole scene with the storm hits, that's really like a big climax moment. And they're found out, right? They're discovered. And she gets to... They're like, oh, well, your parents are here. We know who you are. They let her basically go, but they take Cyrus prisoner, and the faceless man is running around wearing other faces, more or less framing him as being the saboteur. And so then it becomes a story of how do we convince the rest of the ship that Cyrus is not the saboteur, and that there's still a saboteur out there trying to kill us all.
Who can, by the way, take the face of any person.
Right.
Or any creature.
So not that you would ever... And there's a lot of like, well, I can't tell them that this person can change their face. They'll never believe me. That sounds crazy. And I'm like, what? Tell the first mate who can read your mind that there's a person who can change their face? Or maybe, and who have a crew full of people that turn into dragons? Like, this doesn't sound so horribly unbelievable. But
Well, yeah. There's a part of that, but there's also the part that she doesn't know. Maybe she's telling the person who is the faceless one who could look like
and
anybody.
it does take them a while to figure out that the faceless ones, because the faceless one from the book is one of many faceless ones, we're told, on that side of the mountains. But the trick that she eventually discovers from talking to Cyrus about it is that they always have a tell. There's always one thing about them that they can't change. And in this case, he can't change his eyes, and they're always bloodshot. And so it's just an issue of run around and accuse every single person with bloodshot eyes on this very stressful place where they've been not getting much sleep that they must be a saboteur, right?
Simple.
Right.
Simple. And with Cyrus imprisoned, it becomes easier for the saboteur to then sabotage the ship.
And there's a few more instances with the saboteur. Like the saboteur and Stella run afoul of each other, and she almost gets flung over the edge of the airship, and she screams and yells, and people come to her help, and the saboteur disappears. And then she's starting to think through things. It's like, well, we're past the mountains now. We're getting into the uncharted lands. The saboteur hasn't tried to sabotage anything for a while. What's going on? What are they going to do? And eventually she figures, oh, he's going to go after Cyrus. That's step one. You have to get rid of Cyrus in order for the sabotage to be successful. And so she decides, I'll just hang out there and wait until he shows up, and we'll be ready for him. And so she works with mom and dad and brings dad along while mom is taking care of some other things. And dad is supposed to cause a distraction, and all these things go down, and she runs in and then discovers that actually the dad that she's been working with this whole time is the faceless man who has knocked dad unconscious in the bathroom or whatever. And they go after Cyrus, and they chase him away because other people show up to help. The captain and the first mate and some other crew members show up to help. And the faceless man disappears and whatever, but also the faceless man makes it clear that like it's too late. It doesn't matter anyway. The sabotage is already done. It was already set up, and there's nothing you can do about it. Eric, you were going to say something?
Well, the sabotage, from what I recall, is in the furnace room managed to blow it up, and thus the ship, the Iron Glory, is at that point crashes.
Right. Yeah. No. He did something to one of the boilers or whatever, so that it was slowly building up pressure and would eventually explode. But by then they managed to run down and try to stop it. They're not able to stop it, but Cyrus is there with them and uses his power to sort of shield most of the ship and the crew from the explosion. So you almost get the impression like this airship plummeted out of the sky and crash landed in unfamiliar territory, and I don't think anybody ends up dead. Everybody survives the crash, right? You're not sure for...
Yeah, nobody.
Yeah, you're not sure for a while.
Nobody dies. Yeah, but there are several injuries, including Cyrus. But the Iron Glory expedition looks to be over.
Right. And Cyrus is so he's not. It's not so much his injuries as it is he used so much of his own personal energy to set up that shield and save the ship and its crew that it looks like he's going to die. And so he's sitting in the med bay, if you will. And they're like, well, we don't like, we don't even know what his physiology is. There's nothing we can do here. And Stella insists she's going for help. She remembers he had talked to her that once they're on the other side of the mountains, they're going to be really close to the capital city. What was it? Was it called Koval? Am I remembering that right? Yeah. So they're going to be really close to the capital city, and she's like, maybe I can get there, get help, get back. She tells him of the plan. He's like, no, no, no. She's like, no, I'm going, whether you help me or not. And he's like, yeah, you probably are, because that's how you roll. And so he gave her a map, and he gave her instructions. This is the person you want to find. This is their address when you get to the town. Here's some, she teaches her some of the language and records a little bit. They have a little messenger beetle device that they send back and forth with messages, and so she recorded some of the language on there so she could practice it and learn it. And so then she takes off. She runs off to Koval to find the Tinker, which is Cyrus's mentor or whatever from before the expedition. I'm giving you a chance to jump in, so I'm talking a lot. I may have finished the book more recently of everybody, though, so I don't know if my recall is more fresh.
Well, and it doesn't take... It takes a little bit of time, but it doesn't take too long for her to get there and even to find the Tinkerer. But she starts sending messages back and forth a little bit, too, right?
Yeah.
And that's when she realizes Cyrus has been captured again by the
faceless man has intercepted a message.
Yeah, in fact, she's real close. She can see the city, and she's in like the outskirts and sees like the farms and stuff around it, and then gets the beetle back, and it's the faceless man saying, "Hey, I got everybody, and if you want your parents and Cyrus to survive, come back now. Like, don't bring help, just immediately return." Right?
Right. And she decides to go for it anyway, to go see the Tinkerer. And then ends up at his estate, which seems like a little bit outside the city, or it's like an interesting thing because it gave the impression that there was a lot of land. Yeah, not a ton of land.
I felt like, because I thought it was like his estate was near or just like right across the river, which was in the middle of the city. I was under the impression he was more towards the middle of the city, but just had a large estate.
Yeah, and that was like, it was hard. Because she has to go through all the city, and she does. But she gets to the gate. There's no clear way to get in.
Right.
So she ends up deciding to climb the wall, and
in the invisibility suit.
Right, in the invisibility suit, but in a totally foreign place. And as often happens when you decide to climb a rich person's estate's wall, there are dogs.
Sort of.
This case, there are wolves.
Yeah, giant metal wolves.
The hounds have been released.
Yes. Robotic wolves that come in and try to get her. The Tinker notices that, calls off, tries to ascertain who she is, but quickly realizes that she is human.
Oh, and
also that she is...
And he recognized it almost immediately. Like, he immediately recognized that she was human. He also tells her, like, oh, no, I saw you climbing over the wall. Don't think I couldn't see the signs of the invisibility cloaks. I've been studying this stuff for years.
Yeah.
He probably built the suit, you get the impression.
And weren't humans like her one of the things he was trying to study?
And,
specifically,
You studied that, and you noticed how fluid she is.
When she was running from the wolves, she was like, Olerons don't really run quite so fluidly. So I figure you must be a 100% flesh and blood human over here.
And so, unsurprisingly, he agrees to help her.
Yeah.
Oh, and he's one of those weird, eccentric sort of... And he's called the Tinker. That's the only name we have for him. And he's everything you expect from somebody who's he's the mad wizard, the eccentric mad wizard of the story, right? He's what's his name?
The Wizard of Oz.
He's the Wizard of Oz, only not so fake. Like he's Fizbin from the last book we read, right? And he's like, yeah, I can totally fix Cyrus. Let's go. Get in my weird flying gyroscope thing. Let me gather up my medical bag. And then they fly back to the Iron Glory. The metal wolves are running along underneath them the entire way so that they have some help. And he sends word out to basically the queen. I forget the name that they use, the title they use for the queen, but basically sends a word out to the queen like of what's going on. Send help.
The 11th?
The elegant or elegant,
Elegant. Elegant.
however you
ALAGNT.
without an
Elegant.
audiobook version this time. I have to we just have to make up our own pronunciation of fantasy names, right? So the Tinker and Stella and the wolves get back, and they run into people. They're starting the survivors or the injured or whatever are starting to gather outside of the airship in tents. He leaves the wolf behind just in case. They go and they find Cyrus. He's in the wreckage of the medical room. And then they go down to the cargo hold, figuring that must be where they're hiding because that's a good place to hide because that's where we were all hiding when we were stowaways, right? So obviously that's the best place to hide anywhere on the ship is the place that we figured to hide a long time ago when we were doing this. So they head on down to the cargo bay. They find him there. They sick the wolves on him or whatever. I honestly kind of forget how he was defeated. It was kind of the final defeat of the saboteur was kind of anticlimactic, wasn't it?
It was very quick and like, oh wait, he's defeated now, and
Well, and it
I
was
didn't quite grasp. I think
logical.
it was the wolves.
Yeah, it made sense. Like the guy had no chance. He wasn't any more powerful or whatever than anybody else. When confronted physically, he was overwhelmed. Right, that wasn't his shtick. His shtick was manipulation and hiding in shadows and whatever. So once he was confronted by an overwhelming force, that's the end of that. Right, he's done. And then from there, then the Elegant's fleet of airships shows up and takes him into custody, and they all make friends, and the end. Right? That's more or less where it wraps up.
Cyrus and Stella managed to get to visit this actual city of
Yes.
Koval.
Well, and you almost get they became very good friends, but you almost get the impression that they're love interests as much as anything. Am I imagining that, or is that true?
I got that impression too, that they were developing more of a more intimate relationship, or there's potential for them developing an intimate relationship in the future.
I half expected the epilogue to be like, and then 10 years later they were married and living in Koval and happy and ambassadors between the two sides of the mountains or whatever,
So,
Except of course that as I think we discussed before recording, we feel like this is maybe the final book of the series, but wasn't intended to be. So if it wasn't intended to be the final book, she probably didn't want to jump way ahead in time in the epilogue because there's still more of that story to tell.
Yeah.
So and
I did think it.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say I did think it was kind of cute / funny when I think wasn't it her mom brought up like, "Hey, you seem to be interested."
Oh, yeah.
And she's like, "No, mom, no."
Yeah. Very teenagery, right?
And our mom managed to trick her about talking about Cyrus, and she then figures that out. Like, wait, hold on, my mom's okay, yeah, maybe cute. So it was well.
Yeah, it was
cute, a very cute scene.
Yeah,
it was.
So
yeah, and I liked sort of as an aside to the actual story. It's interesting. This whole series is interesting in that Jaleel Johnson keeps telling stories in the same world. They absolutely build on each other, but with completely different characters that don't know each other. It's usually several years in between, and things continue to progress. Like they're not. It's not a sequential story, but they're individual stories that take place in this. It's like she's doing a shared world like the Forgotten Realms, but just with one author. You know, who collaborates really well with herself.
Yeah, I did notice in this one that they do mention about stuff that happened in the previous book. Like there's the train, the 401 that I believe Cyrus went on.
And that was from
They also
the first
mentioned
book.
about one of the first exhibitions from the Uncharted lands that were sent out were not Alarans, but a device, and which basically was that ship in the Secret of Solace, which is got. And he mentioned that that this one, when it came back, it had a good attraction to two young kids, a boy and a girl, which was it's the Secret of Solace. So,
well, which starts to answer
happen.
some of the questions. Like that's one of the things she does in these books. Like you never quite feel like the story's over at the end of any of these books, and you hope that the next book will sort of let you know what happened, and they never really do, but they kind of do. Like we knew that the kids got on the ship and went back to the Uncharted lands with that unmanned ship, right? And they said that that they arrived or whatever. Okay, so where are they? Like, what's going on with them? And I also got the impression not only was the 401 mentioned, the train, but I got that whole story. Mark of the Dragonfly was about this machine girl with no memory of who she was and where she came from. And I'm assuming that she was actually an Oleron who lost her memory. For whatever reason, and ended up on from one of the expeditions or something. Although this was pre-manned expeditions, maybe we don't know how long that ship was buried from Secrets of Solace, do we? So anyway, I was assuming that she is an Oleron as well. So we're actually getting some answers to these. Now we don't know what happened to her specifically, but now we kind of have an idea of who she is and how she got there. Maybe So it's interesting to see how. Julie Johnson is sort of building this lore and answering some of those questions without actually directly addressing those questions. And I think this one sets up equal questions. Like, okay, so what's going to happen now between the humans and the Olerons? And is are Stella and Cyrus sort of instrumental in that? There's also the mystery of the storm. Like Cyrus explicitly calls out, there's always a storm here. It's always really bad. It never moves. We don't know why. There's even talk and conspiracy theories that there are people living under the mountains who want to keep us separated that generate the storm intentionally to keep people away. Right? And all of that's like, you've laid out a whole bunch of stuff that needs to be explored. Like within this book, it just creates a challenge, but like that's a whole setting. That's a whole bit of setting lore that really needs answering. And now I'm worried we're never going to see an answer, right? This is the only of the three books that never got an audiobook. And my understanding from tweeting with Julie was that they're never going to make one. And she's started writing a new series as well. So I'm guessing maybe the sales weren't good enough or what for the rest of the series. I know the first one did well. But maybe the rest of the other two didn't do well enough, and maybe we're done with the Solace series, and I'm kind of sad about it. Like it's a weird and interesting and unique, but in somehow relatable world.
And all the questions that they keep asking, and the new, like even at the end of Quest, as you said. What will happen between the humans and the Olaran and all that? Well, this is a great setup for role-playing games. You can probably do a D&D campaign on that or another game system for it. So the World of Solace is rich in all these three books of elements that you can go and have fun and play with it. It's a shame that if we don't get any more books in the series, because but I also want to play in that sort of setting.
Well, and there's a lot of part of me wants to. It's ironic because the Eberron book is a setting book, but there's a lot of stuff from the Eberron book that you can just sort of rip out and put into this world and kind of make it work. You know, Cyrus is a war-forged sorcerer. The Faceless Man is a changeling. You know, we have airships and we have trains. All of this is stuff that we get from Eberron. You know, dragon shards and what is the metal? Alethium are kind of functionally the same kind of thing, right? You could absolutely make a D&D campaign in this world. And I'd be interested to see it happen too. I just wish we had more of the setting to explore, because the way she sort of slowly unfolds the world means that we've only got like a seedling to start with, and we'd have to flesh out the rest of it on our own, I guess.
Right. And I think stealing the storm idea that somebody's creating the storm to keep them apart or to hide themselves is like something you can definitely do as well. So it's definitely rich for, because I know we usually want to say like, what is this book? How this book be useful to people who are playing D&D? And it's definitely a lot of those things. It's taking things that are very common, but giving them a twist that makes it, I think, fresh in terms of particularly bringing it into a game.
Yeah. And I think it's also interesting to think about like this world shows like there is a certain level of technological advancement, but I don't know that I could equate the technological advancement of this world to any time period of actual Earth history, you know? Like they have steam powered things, but they're also talking about being familiar with circuitry, and you know, it's not like there's no, so far as I remember, there's no like guns or anything like that, right? So it's all, but it all seems to work in this setting. Like things just sort of develop differently here. So it's interesting to think creatively. You know, just get out of the headspace of, well, D&D is pseudo medieval fantasy, right? Because clearly fantasy worlds don't have to be that at all. And this is a really interesting example of that.
Yeah. Well, even in this book, like for the Olarans, they are good with machines, but they also mentioned that they're not that good in medicine compared to the humans, who their medical technology is high. So, you know, they have a basis for trade or exchange of ideas to basically make it work. So
they just pick different paths in the civilization build process.
They absolutely did. All right. So we've talked through the book. We've talked through some of our ideas and our thoughts. Any other sort of last thoughts that anybody wants to share before we wrap this up?
Well, another thing for RPGs, for the story itself, it could sort of feel like a railroad, because literally they were just stuck on this airship and they can't. That's the path that's going. But there's lots of work in there and all that you can play. And also the book with the crash shows how to possibly take a failure in the game. Oh, they failed to save the ship to completely work, but they get to continue the story, which is also another useful tool to use for role-playing games where, okay, what is the next in the story after, oh, we just rolled a 1 on saving the ship. Down. Oh, it's going down. Right. What can we do now? Oh, wait. Let's save everyone, and then we'll figure out what to do next.
Gives us a new angle on the story, yeah. And I don't know that I agree that it's a railroad type of story, because it's not like the characters were forced necessarily to always go from plot point A to plot point. Like sometimes things happen, right? But that happens in a sandbox story too. The events occur. Yeah. It's just, I feel like it's a sandbox story. Or it could be a sandbox sort of story, but it's a really small sandbox because you're on the airship and there's no way off of it, right? So it's just a really small sandbox story.
Yeah.
So,
It is a moving sandbox within this set.
right.
So
Absolutely. Tracy, last thoughts?
And with time-based event. Oh, and I'm gonna say that with the time-based events, right, that they might not even know about.
yeah.
Talking about the storm and a couple other things like that.
Absolutely.
Right.
All right.
That's all I got.
All right. Then I'm going to go ahead and call that the end of the episode. So it's time to say goodbye. We want to say thanks to all of our patrons once again at patreon.com/The Tome Show. And to those of you who shop at Amazon and DM's Guild using our affiliate links at thetomeshow.com.
And if you'd like to contact us, you can send us an email at thetomeshow@gmail.com. You can call our biz line. That's 919-BIZ-TOME, 919-BIZ-TOME. You can contact me, Tracy, at Sarah Dark Magic on Twitter and sarahdarkmagic.com. You can find Jeff at Squatch, at SQUACH, and at The Tome Show on Twitter. And Eric is at Eric Mpack. You can watch our stream of our episode recordings at twitch.tv/Tome Show or watch the video after the fact on the Tome Show's YouTube channel. Show notes and other great shows are at
it occurred to
thetomeshow.com.
me that in terms of streaming, if we wanted people to really have an opportunity to watch, we should probably not record and schedule these things opposite Critical Role. Because that happens on Thursday nights, right? So here we are.
Well, people know what they need to watch. People know what they need to watch.
They should. But I suspect more people are there than here. Right? Okay. So that is our thoughts on the quest to the Uncharted Lands. Up next in March, we will be reading Pawn of Prophecy by David Eddings. Until then, keep turning the page, Tomites. And that's the end of the episode. Say goodbye to anybody who's watching the video.
Goodbye.